So we're very thankful, and we just bless you, Andre, in the name of the Lord. We're just so thankful for your guidance, and we are enriched, greatly enriched, and greatly blessed of the Lord as watchmen. And we just say over you that the Lord will bless you greatly for the efforts that you're making to do this virtual tour. And you know that the best days of your life and your ministry are ahead of you and not behind you, in Yeshua's name. Go ahead and take over, Andre.
Amen. Thank you so much. This was really weird. I'm trying with the 3 different devices, and it just none of them is just logging in, and so weird. Anyhow, we're making our journey today to the very special land, as a geographic area. We are going to talk about ancient Shilo, the biblical Shilo, the mountains of Samaria. And I think that this place carries a very strong prophetic message, especially for those that are in understanding of the prophetic dynamic of what the Lord is saying, and how hearing his voice is so vital in the time we're living in. So I want to take us into this heartland, the area that is the heart of the biblical geographical biblical land, the very heart of it. And there are many different. I mean, I just I can't go into the details, but if you look from different perspectives, you can still come to the same conclusion that the heart of the land of Israel is actually Samaria. It is Samaria. And so we will see if that has any specific connection or relation to now, to our times, our days now in which we're living in. But I think that it definitely carries a message that can be applied, and it will help us to understand what the Lord is saying. At least from my point of view, it's a very loud and clear voice of what the Lord is saying now about that particular part of the land and what he's saying. So welcome to this ancient Shilo, and as we say in Hebrew, Shilo, we should say Shilo. We'll understand why there's a importance in correct pronunciation, or at least understanding the meaning of the word. You can see, for those who've been in Samaria, in Shilo, you have probably seen this is an ancient city of Shilo. Right here it is. There is a place that most likely was the place where the tabernacle was. Here's the picture of tabernacle on it. Of course, it's only a picture. It's not really there anymore. However, there are several models of the tabernacle. We'll talk briefly about tabernacle because this is not the focus of today, but we want to understand a general idea of what is happening there. What is this place? How does this fit into biblical geography? So here we are. Let's have a geographical overview. First of all, if you look at the map on the left, you can see Google Earth. Here is Shilo. Here's the pinpoint where it is. And I've mentioned earlier that Israel is divided into 3 main geographical sections. So you have the valleys, which is on the east, on the right here, Sea of Galilee, Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea, and farther on to all the way to Elat. And then you have this seashore, which is here. You have Galilee, okay, Nazareth, and you have Haifa and all the Tel Aviv, all the coastline. And then you have a third section that is a very important section. That's the section of the mountains. And the mountains begin here at the Jezreel Valley, northern side, and they continue on through. So you have the mountains of Samaria, then they kind of include Jerusalem in them, and then Judea, which is continuation of the same mountain ridge, Samaria, Judea, Bethlehem, Hebron, and then they end up toward Beersheba. That's where this mountain ridge ends up. So you can really have this kind of clearly seen even from from the Google Earth, but also on maps, the mountains of Israel. The mountains of Israel is vital to understand, because I've mentioned it somewhere that people of Israel, when they come, including Abraham, we've talked about it, about the garden, you remember, we've talked that Abram and Lot and the descendants of Abram, in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the people who had flocks of goats and all of this, they were called the people of the mountains, because mountains was the place where they settled from Beersheba, but on into Hebron, into Samaria. We're talking about these shepherd a nation, all right? It's a nation of shepherds, really, because I mean, think about it, even prophetically, how amazing God chosen a specific nation, that he formed them as a nation of shepherds so that they can understand what it means to have a shepherd. This is, you see, that this is just absolutely amazing, even to think this way. But God had called them and brought them in to this land as a nation of shepherds from Exodus, from Egypt in Exodus. And so here is a map on the right-hand side, the journey of the conquest of Canaan. Now Moses is now went to be with the Lord, and Joshua is leading the people from across Jericho. Here's Jericho, here's Mount Nebo. The journey leads them down into the valley, approximately here somewhere across Jericho, in the plains of Jericho. Here they are. And then they come and take over Jericho. Then they go and take over Ai, another city nearby here in the mountains. And then look at this journey. Here's the blue color. They just move up. There's an intersection next to Bethel. There is a conquest that begins, the campaign, southern campaign that Joshua leads into the south. First, he's taking care of you remember the story of the, what's their name? The Gibeonites, right? That he came to save them, and the sun stood still, and all of this in the valley. Okay, so this, we're talking about this area here. But then the journey goes up here, and it pretty much one of the first places Joshua takes over is Shechem, Nablus. Shechem. It takes Shechem. Okay, here it is. It's here, Shechem, and basically then after, now from this center of the mountains, right? Look at this on the right map. You can see it clearly. He gets the center of the mountain ridge. From here, he's going to lead two campaigns, the northern campaign and the southern campaign. Southern campaign is first, and the northern campaign, that's recorded in Joshua 11, 10 and 11. And you can read the details, it's amazing. But the center stays in the heart of the mountains. And there in the heart of the mountains, Joshua chooses to establish a place where they're going to set at the tabernacle. And the name of the place is Shilo. Shilo. We'll understand in a moment what's so significant about it, and why Shilo. We really still have no idea. We know that the city, we don't have any information about the previous name of the city. Was there a city? We know archaeologically there was a city. We don't have any information about it. We know that Shilo is the way it's mentioned now. All right, so this becomes their center. And so from here, everybody go on, the tribes are gonna go out in Joshua 19, and they're gonna get the possession of the land from Shilo. Okay, we're talking about this division of the tribes and settling of the tribes. So this becomes the center. Now, geographically, it is the center. Topographically, it is the center. From here, you have the strategic view of the valley, both, and the coastline. I mean, you can see if you come to the mountains here of Shilo, mountain of Ephraim. Okay, this is an area given to Ephraim. And so from the mountains here, you're really on the top of Israel. I mean, I'm not joking. This is the top of Israel. So this is one high place, the top of Israel, and the second one would be mountains of Hebron. But this one, Shilo, it's so amazing, because from here you can see everything. You can see Mount Hermon. You could even see of Galilee, less because it's in the valley here, but You can see the direction, the Jordan Valley, you can see the Dead Sea, you can see the coastline. It's phenomenal. I mean, you're really on the top of Israel there. No wonder that the Bible, the Old Testament, all of the events, and I would say this, 90%, and I would not exaggerate by saying this, 90% of all biblical events of the Old Testament happened in the region of the mountains. Therefore, people of Israel have been called by Philistines, okay, and by God himself. He was called God of the mountains. Philistines said, oh, they are the people of the mountains, and their God is God of the mountains. So let us fight with them in the valley. And so they fight with them in the valley, and God said, oh, you say I'm a God of the mountains. Let me show you who I am. And so they have a great victory in the valleys. But this concept, people of the mountains, these are the people. In the books of Deuteronomy, and we'll look in the book of Deuteronomy in several places, when God gives description of the land of Israel, he is going to use the terms besides land of milk and honey, but the land of running water, of hills, of springs, there's all of these mountain descriptions that in the valleys, you don't have that. You don't. The land is super fertile than the mountains here, the mountains of Samaria and Judea, particularly Samaria, because it's more north. Judea is more kind of rough and it's more dry, but this is just, I mean, it snows there. Okay, it's almost every year there's some snow that on the top of these mountains here. We're in elevation of 700 and over 700 meters above sea level. So that is over 1,000 meters from the Dead Sea up in elevation. And so the weather is phenomenal. Climate is amazing. Anyway, we begin to understand what's happening here. So here is the verse from Joshua 18. Joshua 18, it said, gives us clearly the description of where we are and why this place is chosen, what's the reason for it. So now the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shilo and set up the tabernacle of meeting there, and the land was subdued before them. Okay, so this is it's a statement, it's a seal of that the Lord had subdued the land before us. We are now at rest. We are now at the peace time, and we're setting the tabernacle. You shall therefore survey the land in 7 parts and bring the survey here to me, that I may cast lots for you here before the Lord God. Joshua says this is the place where 7 of the tribes are going to go from to get their possession. Some of them got land earlier, which was Manasseh, right? You remember Gad and the tribes of the east side. Here is again, here's the map of the tribes. So where are we? We're right in the Mount of Ephraim. Here's the mountains of Ephraim. Shilo is right in there. It's important to understand the concept of Ephraim in the Bible. I was just reading Isaiah this morning, and it just speaks about Ephraim. God's words to Ephraim are just phenomenal, because you see, Ephraim began, or he became the symbol of the northern 10 tribes. Ephraim, he was like the leader. By the way, who was Ephraim? Ephraim and Manasseh, they're the 2 sons of Joseph, right? So 2 sons of Joseph, that the youngest, right? Who was the youngest? Manasseh or Ephraim? Ephraim was the youngest. And so youngest got a blessing, and Joseph was trying to figure that out. But Jacob said, no, leave it alone. I know what the Lord is saying, that the youngest is going to be greatest. So what happened? So what was the greatness of the youngest? That he became the firstborn. Ephraim, God says, my firstborn. He got the blessing of the firstborn. And on his territory, they had, so Shilo, the center, was in his territory, Ephraim. And so there are many prophecies about Ephraim. There's also many conspiracies about it, which I'm not going to go into, but there are but the idea of Ephraim, of carrying the anointing of being a firstborn, as though he's responsible for the rest of the tribes, at least for the northern tribes, Ephraim and Judah, right? There's that part of it. You see, he didn't get a big area. He got quite smaller area. Look at Manasseh, East Manasseh, here West Manasseh. Amazing, tremendous, tremendous. But Ephraim got the first one. He got the blessing in his territory. There's going to be, it's a symbol of restoration. It's a symbol of what's going to happen. You remember the take when he says in Ezekiel 37, take the rod Israel, Ephraim and Judah. Ephraim and Judah, this whole thing of coming together. And so there is something about Ephraim that is yet to be fulfilled, that will represent the rest. At least this is, I could say, or we could say from the biblical perspective, but also now as we speak of Shilo, that significance of Ephraim's prophetic destiny was really the largest influence on the whole northern kingdom, on the whole northern tribes, on all the tribes of the north. We're talking about 10 tribes. They're the main influence on them and what's going to happen with them are going to come through Ephraim and through the anointing of Ephraim. Okay, so now where are we? We'll talk about location for a moment. Shilo, Shilo. What are we talking about? Where are we? How do we know we're in the right place? So this is one of the most unique descriptions on any place exists in the Bible that has such a clear geographical description in the text. There is no other city, no other location that got that precise description than Shiloh. This one got the most precise description. You have, here's Google Maps on the left, and here we have the Highway 60 that goes from Jerusalem on toward Nablus. Okay, Highway 60, you have a different, here it's more than highway, of course. The ancient highway was pretty much same pattern, maybe a bit small differences, but it's pretty much the same. And so you have Jerusalem in the south, Shechem, Nablus in the north. Here is a picture of an inscription that is located in the museum in Shilo. And that inscription is from Byzantine era. We're talking about 1500 years ago. 1500 years ago, they found a mosaic floor of one of the churches that were found in Shilo. And on that inscription, it actually has mentions, here's the name, Shilo. You see that? Shilo, okay, Shilo. In other words, it's like when you find something like that archaeologically, it's like you're entering, in and you have a sign that says, "Welcome to Shilo." So literally 1500 years ago, Byzantines have identified that place as the ancient Shilo. And so here's a description about the location. The location is very significant here. So we know where are we. Here's where Tel Shilo is. And then look what happens for Judges 21 and Judges 20. You know the story about the woman, right, that went with this with a man to be his concubine, his wife. I think I remember correctly. Anyway, and he stayed overnight at the tribe of Benjamin, and then they sexually abused her until she died. And then he takes the woman and he cuts her into 12 pieces, sends into 12 tribes of Israel, and people all freak out and they say, we're going to destroy Benjamin. And so they go for a war and they kill most of the Benjaminites, and there are just a few men that left. And so after that, they say, oh, they regret they did it. And so they said, what can we do? Because we can't give our wives. We made an oath that nobody's going to give his wife to Benjaminites, right? That this is just, we made an oath. And so then they said, wait a minute, let's give them a chance. So how are we gonna go around our own oath? Okay, how we can do this is, I know it's funny, but this is how the Jewish people, they're good with this. They kind of put boundaries, and then they know how to go around their own boundaries, right? That's anyway, dynamic of the Jews, how they do it. But anyway, here's what they say here in Judges. Then they said, in fact, there's a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh. There's a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh. And so what's happening is that let's invite them to the feast. And then there's these women women are going to dance and celebrate in the vineyards. And so we'll just say to the Benjaminites, we're not going to give you our wives, but you can come and kidnap them. Okay. And so Benjaminites are hiding there in the vineyards, and they just pick a wife or, from the women. And this is how they're going to restore the tribe again. That doesn't work in our lifetime, does it? We don't have that kind of culture. Back then, it was different. It was accepted more than what we think, and it was some sort of a. It wasn't really out of the way of the culture of the time. We're still talking about ancient culture, old culture. This is over 3,000 years ago. So that's what they did. But they say here in Judges 21:19, you have the description. That's what's phenomenal. You have exact description of where Shiloh is. Feast of the Lord in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel. So here's Bethel. Here's Luke mentioned Bethel. So we're north of Bethel, has to be north of Bethel. On the east side of the highway, here's the highway, Highway 60. The Highway 60, you could move it a little bit to the left. Technically, you could, okay? Not very far left, but a little bit because of the villages here. So maybe a little bit to the left here, still north of Bethel. Here's the highway that connects Bethel and Shechem, Nablus. On the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem. Bethel here to Shechem, Nablus. So there's this highway on the east side of it. And south of Levona. So what do we know? Here's an Arabic village called Luban. Luban Sharqiya. So the Luban probably commemorates, as many of the Arabic villages commemorate the names from the ancient names. They keep the name. And so Luban, Lebona, very possible. So if you come to Lebona, you already missed Bethel. So you got to go back, right? Back a little bit. So it's because you have to be south of Lebona, but on the east side of the highway, here's the highway. Here's exactly on the east side of the highway, south of Lebona, north of Bethel, on the highway that leads from Bethel to Shechem on the right side. Perfect. I mean, this is just phenomenal. And that's probably one of the most unique descriptions we find in the Bible of a place. But this one gets it. So everybody know where Shiloh is. Don't just say it, but give us clear description so that they all can come to the yearly feast. The yearly feast was probably summer feast. We're not talking about three high holidays. We're talking about another feast, which had to do with probably collecting of the grapes, which would be somewhere in August or something like that. And that's the Feast of Shiloh. What was discovered in there? This part of the excavations that were done here, this building used to be a mosque, a mosque that was built by the Ottoman Turks. The mosque in the lower layer of rocks had used some of those stones that were here previously and used them as the foundation, as the cornerstones. Part of the stones that they used, was interesting, was actually helps us to identify the dating of the place, because the stones that they used were already there, okay? And the stones tell us of an early Roman period. So there was some kind of maybe even a Jewish building or something that has to do with the Jewish community here that was built, that had something going on here in the first century, so 2,000 years ago, Roman time, and they've used it to be a cornerstone of the mosque. And very often, you know what, mosques are being built in order to really take over, or to be built on top of churches, on top of other religious structures, to really claim them. So, but this one, it's funny because they actually use their cornerstone from a previous building, just to make sure we'll know what was here before. Anyway, what was here before? It was two layers of churches, Byzantine churches, very large churches, big churches. We know that they identified this place as Shilo. The biggest question in the archaeology throughout the years this was excavated, the excavations begin since 1967, because this is when Israel had conquered this section of the West Bank, right, of the mountains. And so for the first time, Jewish people had access to the biblical heartland where 90% of the Jewish Bible have happened. I mean, you have to understand what we're talking about, what kind of their excitement that was born in the hearts of the religious Jews who finally had an access to a piece of land where 90% of the Bible happened. It's really, really unique. Okay, so anyway, the big question in the research was, were the churches built on top of the place where was a tabernacle? So they've digged around, they've digged beneath, and they couldn't find anything, but the churches were there. So beautiful. One of these churches, the church here, that's where they found the mosaic that says Shilo, mentions Shilo in it. Let's see what's happened. Now we want to understand what it means a little bit, a place of Shilo. We will come back to the subject of tabernacle's location, because that's what people wanted to find. If we can find tabernacle, maybe we can find some of the elements, some of the tools that were used in that place, which is super significant. What is the meaning of the word Shilo? What is it? For the first time, we meet this interesting term in Genesis 49. Very interesting term. Genesis 49, in the blessing of Jacob to Judah, prophetically describing and using this term to describe Messiah, to describe salvation, what's going to happen. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, no lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him, in other words, calling Shiloh him, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. So many people use this to explain that that Shilo is him, is Lion of Judah, is the Messiah. He is himself is Shilo. Then what is the meaning of the word Shilo? Shilo, there are two meanings. Here it is. Shilo or Shalev, the same root, rest or peace. Okay, peace. Shilo, from there, shalom, also same idea. Shilo, shalom. Shalev means at rest, being at rest. Shalva, rest. Shalom, so rest, peace. Or Shilo, meaning belong to him. Shelo, belongs to him. And so all of these meanings can be used. And so, but these are the meanings. But now, why is it so significant for Joshua? I'm thinking of Joshua, the son of Nun. Joshua still making a decision, number one, to establish the tabernacle in this particular place, Shiloh. And the question is why? What is moving him to do this? And then we can think of Deuteronomy. There are 5 scriptures in Deuteronomy that speaks about the promised land, and this is one of them. This is one of them that really is going to help us to understand why Joshua names this place and establishes tabernacle in this particular place. So here's one in Deuteronomy 12. There are more scriptures that say pretty much the same thing. When you cross over the Jordan, dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you what? Rest from all your enemies. You remember we read in Joshua, what is it? We read in 18 when he says the land was subdued before them, and then they established tabernacle. So Joshua literally takes these verses from Deuteronomy, promise of Moses, and he says, okay, when God is going to give us rest from the enemies, and we will dwell in safety, then he is placing the tabernacle in the place that is called rest, because we got rest, we got peace, And now we're declaring that this place belongs to him. This place belongs to him. And so there will be that place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. You might say, wait a minute, isn't that place should be Jerusalem? It will be Jerusalem, but not quite yet. Not quite yet. This is the beginning. This is the journey of the presence of God on earth, being revealed on earth from Moses, from the desert journey. Presence of God is being revealed on earth. It's never been revealed like that. Never. It's the first time through the tabernacle of Moses, through the tabernacle of meeting, right? Presence of God is going in and then entering and coming back because we understand the principle of the garden. But anyway, coming in this land and then establishes this place that God chose to be for the first time, to establish his presence in there, in a tent, in very different setting than Jerusalem. It's not a capital. However, Shilo became the capital. Okay, but it's different. And so, but this totally connected to exactly that God chooses the place. Joshua has making this according to his revelation, his way of understanding and interpreting Deuteronomy and verses about the place. Finally, we are at rest, we are at peace. This belongs to him. Now, a short explanation about tabernacle. The tabernacle, as we know, again, this is not, I'm not going into teaching on tabernacle. There's just too much to go through, but the gate was on the east. Coming through the gate into the court where only Levites and priests were operating. People would give their sacrifices at the gates to the Levites and priests. You have the altar, you have the laver, then you have the tent itself with the veil, deep in the Ark of the Covenant, all of these descriptions, menorah, of course, golden lampstand, the altar of incense, table of the showbread. We have the sizes of it, okay, so we know that how Moses has done it. And in order to get a little bit of an idea, I want to show you a video. Somebody, not me, but somebody made a video of a presentation in Shilo in the museum that gives a really overall explanation about tabernacle from the religious Jewish viewpoint. And so I want you to see this. So I'm going to turn it on in a second. You should have the volume and the sound included in it. Anyway, to make a comment here about the tabernacle, you see, we've touched on it yesterday when we spoke about Magdala, that God's presence was there from the very beginning to be in the midst of the people. People are around it. The tribes were around it. The people would gather around this place so that they could really experience the presence of God together, experience each other, and learn together. This is the Jewish idea, understanding of how you approach. And so with this mindset, we're going to see what happened later on there in that place. All right, I hope that gives a little bit of an overview. I commented that some of the explanations given in the movie, they are not biblical, but they're rabbinical. There are some explanations that the Bible doesn't mention. For instance, there's no mentioning of broken tablets were in the ark. This is a rabbinical interpretation. And also some other things about the construction, exactly how it was, and the different things, for instance, the shape of the showbread, the size of the showbread, we don't know this, but that's okay. So this is just, I'm saying it so that we won't have those questions, because that's why it doesn't fit. But anyway, the suggested location. So this is probably where it was. There is a bedrock here that is chiseled. There is a bedrock here that is also chiseled. In fact, if you measure this section here, not this right one, but here left one, you can actually measure exact measurements, precise measurements, and you'll get to that 100 cubits to 50 cubits, and the direction is exactly east-west. So it's pointing east-west exactly, and so this helps us to understand that there's a very big chance we're in exactly right place. Now, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the story of Hannah. So here is, of course, Hannah, and she comes to Shilo with her husband and with Peninnah and with her children, with Elkanah, right? They come there, and so Hannah rose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shilo. Now, Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. So where's the tabernacle? This is the tent of meeting. Here's the door. So he's sitting there at the entrance. Why? Because people bring to the gates. They bring to the gates sacrifices. They bring out. They can't go. Only priests can do this. And so Eli the priest is there. Okay, and so she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. 1 Samuel 1. So what happens with her? She actually comes, and she probably she came through the gate and she was in the court. Probably. And he was there, and he was trying to figure out what's going on. And then you know there's this discussion, and then he says by the Holy Spirit that your prayer will be answered. Okay, and so, but we're talking about the entrance, because otherwise you wouldn't have you wouldn't be able to do this. Okay, and let us understand a little bit before we read about Samuel's revelation. Let's just understand what is happening prophetically with Hannah. Who is she? What family she's from, and what is going on there in the prophetic realm. So first of all, Elkanah, the meaning, some Hebrew, Elkanah, jealous for God. If you remember, if you read 1 Samuel, you read that the people really stopped coming. People saw the corruption, and so they really didn't want to do anything with this anymore. But he, Elkanah, was jealous for God. Elkanah, that's what his name means. He was jealous for God. Where he was from Ramatayim Tzofim, Heights of Watchmen. He lived in the place called Heights of Watchmen. He was jealous for God. The mountains of Ephraim, Ephraimites. Ephraim means fruitful. He was called to be fruitful in the land of fruitful. He lived on the heights of the watchmen. He was jealous for God. He had two wives. One of her first wife was called Peninnah, which means pearl. She was also showing her face. She knew her worth, in her physical way, outwards way, and so that's what she was. She was trying to show how beautiful she is, how great she is, and of course by this she was pressing down Hannah. Now, what Hannah's meaning is, of course, grace of God, Chana, chen of God, grace of God, and Hannah had a grace from God. She obtained grace of God. And not because of what she had done, but because of the grace. She was led to do what she did. And then in a moment, I'll explain what I mean. And of course, Shmuel means God has heard. So God has heard, and that's how she named it, because God has heard her prayer. Now, you have to understand something here through the Hebrew. You see, let me ask you a question. If you look at the prayer of Hannah, I don't think I have it. Let me see. No, I don't have this here. But the prayer of Hannah was that she basically was so broken of just saying, Lord, I just want a child because I can't stand anymore the shame. I don't want anything. but I want this child, and I'm ready to go to do something very radical. And she was led to come to the entrance of the tabernacle, maybe even through the door. Okay, and that's why, you know, Eli thought she was drunk. What was she doing? She was so bitterness of soul, praying like that. And that was an act of faith, an act of really, I can't even explain better, but act of intercession. She placed herself on the altar of intercession because she wanted to have a son. She wanted to have a baby. She felt there was something in her, but it's not, she's not able to get it out. She's not able to give birth. She wanted, but she couldn't. And so she knew God was the only answer. So she put herself on the altar of intercession. Now, do you think God had a plan for Samuel beforehand? Of course he had. But in order for Samuel to be born, Hannah had to put herself on the altar of intercession, had no idea who that child would become. Everything she knew was, I want a child. I have to do this. And I know that this is important, and I'm going to dedicate him to God. And God has heard her prayer, meaning his faithfulness, and he's fulfilling his prophetic destiny through a person that lies and puts herself on the altar of intercession, because she understood what it means, what prayer is. What does it mean to stand before God in prayer? That what brought her in, that raised the zeal that she had to carry her into that brokenness, into that ongoing intercession that moved the purposes of God, because God had this already planned, right? But she had to act, you know? It's just, you, of course, we know, we should all know this, that God has purposes, but we are the tools. And so without us participating with God, things are not going to happen the way he planned. Of course, he would ultimately do it, like he said to Esther. Okay, if you're not going to do this, then salvation will come from another place, but you're going to perish. And so this is that kind of thing, that we put ourselves on the altar, not knowing what God will do with it. And God has a plan, a phenomenal plan. And so Samuel is born out of that intercession, and out of that intercession was the birth of a man who was the prophet, really, who anointed kings, anointed Saul and anointed David. Okay. You see what was happening back then, that the word was rare in those days. There was no widespread revelation. I bet you guys, you understand that even today, now in our world, with all the stuff that's going on, I mean, I'm honestly saying from my point perspective, and that there is no widespread revelation. There's all kind of voices, all kind of things, but the widespread revelation is just not there, because there is revelation that's not widespread. People are getting all different kind of ideas, and everybody's doing their own thing, as you know. But the Lord came and stood. I'll tell you something about prophecy. I'm not a person to teach you on prophecy, but I will still try to show you what the word is saying here about prophecy. Rebirth. Why rebirth? Because because Joshua died. Okay. Joshua died. Joshua, son of Nun, he was a prophet. And after he dies, there is a period of time of a few hundred years in which there is no widespread revelation, and the word of the Lord is rare. And so when God is rebirthing through Hannah this young new generation of prophetic calling, and Samuel later on, he will establish school of prophets, right? He's going to teach prophetic people. And so, of course, Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, your servant hears." And we kind of end it with this. We usually tend to teach these things, and we say, okay, this is how usually, we just, okay, let's just be open. But what are we expecting to hear? We may expect to hear, oh, you're going to have this in your life, you're going to have that success, you're going to have that door open, you're going to have do all of these great things, right? That's kind of our expectation of the prophetic. But look, I have to be real here. God is calling him not to tell him how great he will be, but the real prophecy. It works like this. The next verse, this is what God is saying to Samuel. He said, I will do something in Israel at which both ears of anyone who hears it will tingle. And that day I will perform against Eli and all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to the end. This is a prophecy of judgment that is coming. You see, if there's a prophet that speaks negatively, we always, just cancel this and say, okay, this is not from God. Don't do this. But I have to tell you guys that the real prophecy has that kind of elements. This is the rebirth. This is rebirth of understanding what is real. The reality is God is going to bring to account the people who are not walking in the covenant with him. He's going to bring them to account. It's not about people, it's about God's voice is heard clearly. And so the reason I'm pointing this out, because I believe that part of what the Lord is doing and will be doing, okay? And for those who've been there in 2019, you remember this picture. God is at work, and in this time in Israel and in the nations with prophetic destiny of that piece of land. I think God wants to restore again that type of prophetic, not a prophetic of prophetic socks, prophetic t-shirt, prophetic, you know what I'm saying, prophetic jeans, that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, you know what I mean. But to rebirth a real voice of God where people know what he's saying right now, and people don't wonder and trying to find out what's going on. I could share on it hours really, and what has to do with the young generation and what the Lord is saying. But just for us to understand that Shilo, that place later on was destroyed, but was not forgotten, because the prophecies, God says, I'm going to restore the land. I'm going to restore mountain of Ephraim. I'm going to bring watchmen on mountain of Ephraim again. They will say, let us go up to the house of the Lord. Let us go up to Zion. Okay, this is part of the restoration. Physically, Israel is restored to the land. Spiritually, we're in the time of transitioning, and we desperately need a revelation of what the Lord is saying now in Israel. We desperately need, and I asked the Lord one day, when I was here, I was coming to Shilo, and I know Fred and Sue, you guys know this, but I would come to Shilo and God would just break me every single time, and I would just weep, and I couldn't understand what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. And one of the questions for me was, God, what are you doing with this? Why do I feel this deep, intercession kind of burden of intercession for this land and for the people to wake up to the Lord, and what he's going to take to do this. And the Lord said, he said, you need to mobilize the nations. There needs to be, there's that spirit like Hannah to birth the prophetic. That's kind of that spirit and other prophetic movement that is going to, I believe, is going to raise up some, and Global Watch, you're part of this one way or another. I know you're a part of it, but it's raising up that spirit of intercession that is going to birth, not just, I'm not talking about revival in Israel, I'm talking about a voice of prophetic in Israel, the prophetic, the clarity of the prophetic, and it has to be reborn. It has to be reborn, because if we in Israel, as the remnant, if we don't know what the Lord is saying, how can anybody else know? You know what I mean? This is just so vital. And then whenever the people in Israel, believers, begin to receive more of that revelation of what the Lord is saying, really what the Lord is saying, then we will be able to get out of our own little corners and begin to see and work with God and see how He wants to use us to bring this nation into receive acceptance of Yeshua, because this is how He's going to come. Okay, I'll stop for now, but thank you. Well, I'll respond to some questions here. Okay. Did Joshua name Shilo? Good question. I don't know, but this is how it's mentioned for the first time. It's in Joshua, and we don't know anything before, and we know this from Genesis. So I presume that Joshua knows Genesis prophecy, and so he's putting it on the ground. He's actually coming to declare that this is the place. This is what he receives from the Lord, and we know that God chosen to put His name there before Jerusalem. That's not a question. Okay, so probably yes. However, I'm not 100%. Samuel, okay, let's see. I'm looking for a question. Samuel ministered before the Lord under an ungodly leader for many years before God actually called him. He was faithful, yes, even when no one in the office wasn't acting right. Yes, that's true. Agree. What was that taken? Oh, yes, that's the yes, Susan. That's the picture I took when we were there. Correctly. It's true. It's just like a covering of God. I love it. That cloud was just there. Suddenly, just all over the sky, and we're like, "What's going on?" We knew God is in this, so I put this in. Okay. Question. Mount Hermon in Lebanon, as well as Israel, same ridge? No, not the same ridge, not at all. But prophetically, we will talk about it tomorrow, I think. I think tomorrow we're going to talk about Hermon, so we'll save this for tomorrow. Not the same ridge, but prophetically same direction. Not the same ridge. Yes, Mount Hermon. We'll talk about this tomorrow. We're going to talk about the secret of two altars, of exploring Tel Dan and Caesarea Philippi, and we'll talk about Mount Hermon tomorrow. Is the foundation of the church is built on the grounds of the the foundation. I don't think so wrong. The foundation of the church built on the ground of apostle and the prophet. All right. Okay. Is that a comment? The question is not clear. Where's David's tabernacle? David's tabernacle does not exist. David's tabernacle was an ark of the covenant in a tent that David built for it. It had nothing to do with tabernacle. Tabernacle in Shilo, destroyed by Philistines. You know the story. They brought the ark and they lost the ark. The Philistines came, destroyed the whole thing, burned the city with fire. Later on, they had plagues there, and so they sent the ark. Remember, they put it on the cart with the oxen, sent them out, and later on, David took hold of it, brought it into the city of David, had a tent over it. He had a tent over the ark. That was David's tabernacle, and what he was doing there would be just worship 24/7. That would David's tabernacle idea is having the presence of God and worship around it all the time. That's it. It was not a sacrificial thing there. Didn't have a religious system of sacrifices set up. It was the presence of God and worship of the Lord. This is, if you think of heaven, what's happening there in the heaven, right, in the realm where angels and they are just worshiping 24/7, holy, holy, holy. That's what David was after. I think because of just his revelation. That's what Tabernacle of David. And later on, when the tent is moving into the temple of Solomon, that Solomon is built, then that is the end of that is the end of the Tabernacle of David, and the sacrifices begin to form again there. Where the Ark of the Covenant is, that's $1 million question. Nobody knows this. There are conspiracies all over the place. It's under the mountain, hidden. It's right under Mount Moriah. It's in India. Some think it's in Ethiopia. Some think it's in, yep. We don't know, and I'm not sure that we will ever know. Okay, I don't think so. But anyway, it never returned from Babylonian captivity according to the historical comments on it. So we really don't know, and the conspiracies go far. Synagogue, that are steps to walk up in order to read the word. They're called aliyah. Jane, could you please clarify? I don't understand. In a synagogue, there are steps to walk up in order to read the word, and they're called aliyah, going up to God's word. I'm not familiar. Synagogue. There are many different synagogues, and not all have steps. And so, but the idea taken from what we call the songs of ascent that David would write in Psalms, songs of ascent. When you walk toward the temple of God, to the temple in Jerusalem, or toward the tabernacle, which was in the upper part of Jerusalem, David's city, then you were just simply going up. So it's a geographical journey up, and as you're walking up, that's the song of ascent, because you're ascending, whether that's steps or whether it's just a journey up. Is Shilo going to be restored according to the prophecy? Do people live there now? Yes, Daniel, thank you. There is a Jewish community there. They're pretty large. I think was maybe 300, 400, or no, maybe something 250 families that live there. They're religious Orthodox that live there, and around it, it is restored. Again, the vineyards are there. It's part of the West Bank, which means disputed territory, right? The Palestinian authorities, of course, in Israel, and that's a whole another subject, which I don't know if we need to have a separate session to discuss this, but yes, people live there now, and it is restored. That's what I said. Physically, there has been a restoration. Israel is reborn. There are Jews coming back, established settlements, right? But spiritually, not yet. Why did God's presence then shift to Jerusalem? Well, the answer for this is clearly because this is where everything started. This is the garden. This is the tree of life. This is prophetically where Yeshua was. Why it's not there from the beginning? That's maybe a better question. Why Joshua didn't establish it straight in Jerusalem? Because I think that's a good question. I think because for Joshua, logically it made sense to make it a center, geographic center, place from which he would lead conquests. So strategically, geographically, and the way he understood Deuteronomy, it made perfect sense for him. Jerusalem was not important strategically. It was not yet the time. Okay, then it's like for me, I see this. First, you have the earthly, and then you have the heavenly. Like Jerusalem, in a sense of a heavenly or a spiritual center. First, you had an earthly, then you have the spiritually, and that's kind of what's happening. Okay, we have same thing, the earthly, and then we have the spiritually. So that's the reason I think that it was there first. I'm sure there are more to it. Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the rest he calls us to. Shekhinah means dwelling. That's what it means. Shekhinah lishkon, dwelling. It means dwelling. And if you think about the whole thing, I mean, we're in the Feast of Tabernacles. What is a tabernacle? Tabernacle is the place where you dwell, you stay in, and that's around. Okay, the Feast of Tabernacles is really the essence of the Feast of Tabernacles is experiencing the presence of God when you are in Him. Obviously, when you're in Him, you're entering into His rest. You're entering into His presence. And so Feast of Tabernacles, the essence of it is that a celebration of what's going to happen, of the wedding of the Lamb. Okay, that's pretty much what it is. It's like a chuppah covering over the wedding feast. That's the wedding feast. That's the, by the way, Feast of Tabernacles. And we're going side here direction, but Feast of Tabernacles is the only feast that has two very important elements. Number one, there's a commandment to rejoice. This feast, this is a rejoicing feast for 7 days. When do you rejoice for 7 days? Only at the wedding. Only at the wedding. That's what you do. Number two, it has to do with the nations. And so that's why it's the ultimate idea of Feast of Tabernacles. Yes, we'll see if there's more. We want to do some other topics and sharings. We'll see how that will go. Why the Ark of the Covenant not taken back to Shilo? Because Shilo was absolutely devastated. Was not a city. City was destroyed. David at that time already established Jerusalem as the capital, so he brought it to the capital. He brought it to his thing. The reason, maybe we need to ask why David decided to put Jerusalem as the capital. I believe because he had revelation of the place spiritually. That's what he put it there. No, Tabernacle was destroyed. Shiloh, after battle with Philistines, was burned down completely. What else? Oh, I see. Esther is commenting. Yeah, one step to read. Very good. Yes, that usually there's a one step in synagogues that takes you from the level to the bima, to the stage, so to speak. That's probably in that same idea of we're going up to the word, to read the word. That makes perfect sense. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Jebusites were in Jerusalem. Yeah, Jebusites were in Jerusalem, but before David, nobody ever made an attempt to take out the Jebusites. I mean, Benjaminites tried to, but they were not able to. They weren't able to. And since Jerusalem was not important, it was waiting for the right time. And that's I told you this earlier on, because if Benjaminites would have taken Jerusalem, they could claim the possession, they could claim the events in Jerusalem as being part of their territory, but they can't because they didn't take it. So nobody took Jerusalem until David did it. And David did it for everybody out of revelation, so that things happen in Jerusalem will be relevant to all the tribes. Okay, it's like it was waiting there for the right time until David got it and took took possession of this spiritually. It wasn't just physically. Hallelujah. Okay, any other comments, questions? I think I covered everything that was in the chat.
Thank you so much, Andre. I believe everybody was greatly blessed today. I was very blessed, and I've learned so much about Shilo I didn't know. So we want to thank you, Andre, on behalf of Fred and Sue and all Global Watch. And I know that this is not going to be the end because it's been amazing. Thank you so much. So why don't we all just unmute and say goodbye to everyone and see you tomorrow.
Yes, guys.
Thank you, Andre. Goodbye.
Thanks.
You all.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Andre.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.